Hong Xiuquan took over a significant part of China in the Taiping Rebellion between 1850 and 1864. The war and ensuing famine killed millions, and bizarrely, Hong started it all with a claim that he was the brother of Jesus Christ. 2 years ago, I traveled to Guangzhou and visited the Hong Xiuquan Museum there. Maoist historians have rebuilt the home where he lived and the school where he taught classes and rejected Confucius. After reading the book God's Chinese Son by a British-American historian, I walked into the museum curious how they would explain away the stranger religious elements. In modern China, the Taiping Rebellion has gained a positive image, getting remembered as an inspiration for Sun Yat-sen and Mao Zedong. So let's take a look at this other view of history. He started out as a village school teacher, taking the civil service exam to try and improve his salary. He would travel from his village to central Guangzhou. Outside the exam hall, he received a pamphlet from a Christian missionary. While bedridden with fever, Hong had visions of the Ten Commandments, which drove him to form a new religious movement hostile to Confucian teachings and centered on Hong's direct communications from God. Other Christian groups caught wind of this, but were unable to dissuade Hong and his followers. The museum writes, Hong used the Christian doctrines and ideas taught in the pamphlet to explain some illusions that he had during a serious illness. Hong's movement arrived at an opportune time to offer a message challenging both the emperor and colonial invaders. After 200 years in power, the Qing dynasty was unpopular. They were bandits and foreign colonies after the First Opium War. During the years of the Taiping Rebellion, there would be multiple armed conflicts ongoing in China. At their peak, the Taipings held a significant share of Chinese territory and population. But a madman cannot hold on to a country with threats and decrees, and the ensuing war and famine is what made their legacy so deadly. After the generals turned on each other and local militias rose up, the Qing dynasty and Manchu soldiers retook Nanjing. This is portrayed as a heroic last stand. So this might be seen as a story of failure or madness. If you heard of the Taipings before this at all, that's probably what you know. But in China, that legacy was about to be rescued by a new generation of revolutionaries. Sun Yat-sen, who would become the first president of the Republic of China, was born in Guangzhou shortly after the Taiping Rebellion. Historians point to Taiping veterans in his childhood, his uncle, and a village school teacher. Other historians say that Sun Yat-sen's father was a veteran of the Taipings, and that he was so radical as a Christian that Sun Yat-sen would break a finger off an idol in the village temple. In 1904, while he was traveling and fundraising for his Chinese democracy movement, Sun Yat-sen wrote the preface to a history of the Taiping Rebellion. In the days of the revolution, Sun Yat-sen would lean on the advancements of the Taipings in challenging the Qing dynasty, and at times referred to himself as the second Hong Xiuquan. In 1912, he was sworn in at the former Governor General's palace in Nanjing, also the former Taiping capital. Let's fast forward to the year 1937. A generation later, Chinese revolutionaries were deeply divided between Chiang Kai-shek's nationalists and Mao Zedong's communists. The Japanese had invaded Manchuria and smuggled in the Qing dynasty's last emperor, Pu Yi, to legitimize their colonial administration. It's no surprise that Hong Xiuquan's ideas to unify China, depose the emperor, and expel foreign invaders were becoming relevant again. Mao's communists gained interest in two documents which connected their ideology to the legacy of the Taipings. A letter by Karl Marx to a New York newspaper praising what he understood to be a peasant uprising, and the land system of the Heavenly Kingdom, where the Taiping promised to reform land ownership and end the serfdom of so many farmers. This is displayed prominently at the museum today. In 1944, Mao would recognize the failure of the Taipings, but attributes it to their arrogance after each victory. He wrote a letter to the historian and poet Guo Mo Ruo, saying that a talented writer should take on the subject. So were these Taipings early communists or a religious cult? The Western view of history has generally dismissed these documents. First, Marx was sort of a content creator of his time, writing about events as they became interesting. He was not very informed about China, and later he would criticize the Taipings as violent and destructive. Secondly, the land ownership plan was never put into force and is less valued by modern historians. Nevertheless, the 1930s had multiple Chinese films, plays, and operas based on the Taiping Rebellion. According to the book Performing the Socialist State, the Taiping king Li Xiuquan was particularly popular. These typically cast Hong Xiuquan as an incompetent leader. During World War II, a historian for Guangzhou province found a document in a Manchu general's family home. Li's history of the Taiping movement and his so-called confession after being captured. This provided new information but raised concerns that Li had surrendered or renounced the movement. The Chinese Civil War ended with the declaration of the People's Republic of China in October 1949. The centennial of the Taipings would occur in 1951. The PRC was able to issue some stamps and establish a monument at the former palace in Nanjing. The historian Guo Mo Ruo, from Mao's earlier letter, played a critical part. Chen Baichen had just released a movie, Crows and Sparrows, criticizing the nationalist government. Chen was invited to write a film for the Taiping Centennial. Having completed his research and writing a script, he was told that the film production could no longer proceed, because Li Xiuquan was now viewed as a traitor. Before we get too deep into the weeds, I want to acknowledge what we're trying to do here is a historiography, to talk about how the view of history has itself changed over time. You could make the same analysis of, in the 1930s, the US had movies like Gone with the Wind about their Civil War. You could say, how come we were going to take Hamilton off the $10 bill, and now everyone in the world wants to see Hamilton? Everything in history books and everything in media tells us a little something. In 1958, a museum was established in Nanjing on the former palace grounds, followed by, in 1959, the former residence museum, which I saw in Guangzhou. They found a long-gone tree which had been planted by Hong Xiuquan. The Qing dynasty had destroyed the village and the school, but archaeologists were able to find, restore, and rebuild. I don't have any evidence that this was like a supernatural Indiana Jones type thing, but I would like to imagine it to be. In reality, these years overlap with the Great Leap Forward, a reinvestment in communist patriotism, and also the Great Famine. Communist historians continue to look for information in Guangxi, an early home for the Taiping Rebellion, but they did not focus on religion, preferring to reinforce the political ideology. By the 1960s, conversations about the Taiping kingdom were still so popular that an essay by Qi Benyu got him noticed by Mao Zedong, landing him a major role in the Communist Party newspaper. In 1966, China re-entered turmoil with the so-called Cultural Revolution. The historian Guo Mo Ruo and his family were among those persecuted by the Red Guards. Guo renounced his previous work and said it should all be burned. But he was rehabilitated in the early 1970s, and his calligraphy still stands. Li Xiuquan's reputation also fell during the Cultural Revolution, with dozens of newspaper editorials and students denouncing someone who, remember, died about 100 years earlier. After Mao's death, it became possible for China to open up in different ways. By 1979, it was possible for a Chinese research conference on the Taiping Rebellion, which included Western scholars. In a report to an academic journal, two of these visitors talked about how historians were rejecting the black and white thinking of the Cultural Revolution, realizing some deficiencies in Hong Xiuquan's revolution, and even rehabilitating Li Xiuquan based on different standards and allowing his confession to just be a historical record. Despite the new openness, 6 years later, historians reported that students in China generally did not believe that Hong had been sincere about his religion and that had been a front to accomplish their political goals. In 1988, a Hong Kong studio released the first TV drama about the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. This had unusual flexibility in showing the origins of the Taiping Rebellion and also connecting it directly to Christianity. In 2000, a Chinese studio with a considerably greater budget and special effects, created a TV drama, but started it in the middle of the rebellion, so there was no sign of the visions. When they do show one of Hong's deputies receiving word from God, I'm fairly certain this is meant to be showing how comical and manipulative it is.
而他却称9000岁。
This larger, modern museum opened in 2014, the 200th anniversary of Hong Xiuquan's birth. The reconstructed village remains its own museum next door, which has more of these old-school posters and dioramas and examples of culture. So I'm wondering if maybe a lot of the museum was stored in these individual houses and got moved into the modern museum. The Taipings have this rejection of foreign colonial powers, so you'll see some content about that. There's also a section about the American riflemen who worked as mercenaries against the Taipings. Yeah, that was pretty weird. And they have a kids section, so if you're wondering, it's fun for the whole family. I'm really glad that I went. I was really overwhelmed. I walked to the train station, I took the train back into Guangzhou, and I had a good visit. It was good. And I'm glad I could tell you about it. If you like or subscribe, it'll go a long way towards showing this video to more people who are interested in history or historiography. And yeah, thanks for watching.